Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Real Talk at the Barbershop, the virtual edition. And I am excited because we have an opportunity to speak with someone who I think incredibly highly of, and the work that he is doing and the organization that he works with is amazing work. And I'm just glad that we are going to have the opportunity to talk to him for a little bit.
No,
So let me introduce you to someone who is, again, really special to me. His name is Dewayne Crawford. Dewayne Crawford is the executive director of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE. Dewayne, welcome. How are you?
Hello, how are you? Hello, audience, our viewing audience. Hello, everyone.
I'm doing good, Dewayne. And you doing all right?
Doing fantastic.
Good. So, Dewayne, so happy that we get a chance to talk to you, and the folks who typically have the opportunity to view Real Talk at the Barbershop probably don't know who NOBLE is. So why don't we start with that? Can you just tell the audience a little bit about NOBLE, what it does, what it's focused on?
Absolutely. So the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, it was founded in 1976. We've been here close to 50 years. And I should say our national president, her name is Serlin J. Davis. She's the police chief of Durham, North Carolina. And we have approximately a little less than 4,000 members. Our mission is to ensure equity in the administration of justice. And we do that, we think, by ensuring that we have the consciousness of law enforcement and do it by being justice by action. So as an organization, though we're a law enforcement organization, we primarily are made up of police chiefs and sheriffs and senior federal law enforcement officials. We also view ourselves also as a human rights and civil rights organization. And part of that is because of our mission of wanting to ensure equity in the administration of justice. And that's any injustice. Now, we don't necessarily get involved in every single thing, but if there's an injustice out there, we always open to listen and collaborate. But of course, we play more on the law enforcement spectrum. You should also know that over half the major cities in America are led by NOBLE members. And though we're primarily African American, we have white members, Latino members, et cetera. But yes, as my boss would say, as best we can, we use our influence or leverage our influence to assist those that may not have a voice at the table or may not even be able to get in the room. And so our goal is represent everyone, but yes, ensure equity in the administration of justice.
Hey, Dewayne, I think it's awesome. And one of the things that you and I have often talked about is that NOBLE is probably one of the best positioned organizations right now, given the challenges that we're seeing in our country. And not just like right now, but over the years. And so as you look into this, what do you see the role of NOBLE being, given the kind of challenges and changes that we have going on right now?
And I think, it's a number of roles. I mentioned earlier today, I was at a law enforcement meeting, or virtual meeting. And I think one, we've got to lead by example. So if half these major cities, so everywhere from Boston and Chicago and, Detroit and Atlanta, et cetera, you look at these cities, we have an opportunity, I think, as members of this organization and as police chiefs and our sheriffs and federal officials to lead by example. For example, tomorrow morning at 10, we're partnering with the Department of Homeland Security, and we're hosting a town hall with basically thousands and thousands of federal law enforcement members and employees and executives having the same kind of conversation. And I was talking with some of their people earlier today as we prepare for this, and we'll have our first vice president, Linda Williams, participating in that. But they're getting requests off the charts. And I think we have to lead by example. We need to educate and inform the public, but also educate and inform our peers in law enforcement. And when I say educate and inform, our goal isn't to tell people what to do, is to try to inform them on what we think are important policies and positions, but also opportunities. And the last thing is, we can't say partnering and community partnerships and trust and legitimacy are important if we're not doing it. So for example, we've got to be a bridge in many cases between law enforcement in our communities or vice versa. So for example, about 4 or 5 months ago, there was a and our world is always something controversial, but this one dealt with the current administration. And as I was talking to this particular representative, he said, Mr. Crawford, you should know that Noble is on this one issue by itself. And so I said on a call, well, we're fine with that because the issue is important to us. So I always tell people at the end of the day, we want to make sure all voices are being heard. And sometimes I said to someone on a call, I said, sir, remember this, an everyday citizen has just as much access to Noble as the Attorney General does, meaning in our constituents are everyone. So a single mother, when a teenage African-American son could call and say, Mr. Crawford, I demand a response, we're going to treat that person just as much as the highest person within a law enforcement profession. But at the end of the day, we're accountable to everyone. And we take it very serious. And I would also say this, we respect this profession. We love this profession. But we also do what? Respect the citizens whose tax-paying dollars go to what? To pay for the salaries and the benefits and the pensions of this profession. We don't view one versus, we don't even view it as, law enforcement versus the public. It's something that was said many years ago by Robert Peel. He's one of the early founders of law enforcement over in England. But he's right. The public is the police and the police are the public. We try to create these divisions, we view them as one and the same.
It's interesting that you say that because one of the things that I have been going through my mind, right, is the fact that we are talking law enforcement, folks, police officers and sheriffs and federal agents, et cetera, those that are involved in this profession. But we're also talking about Black folks,
absolutely,
who are being impacted by everything that is happening today.
Absolutely.
Whether you're talking COVID or whether you're talking, law enforcement, or whether you're talking criminal justice, or whether you're talking, health and healthcare, housing, economics. I mean, your folks are intricately involved all over the place.
Oh, absolutely. And I had a pleasure, you probably know this person, I'm gonna say Cindy at LULAC, but I had a chance this morning to catch up with her because it's a Latino organization, civil rights organization called LULAC, it's an acronym, but I want to get Cindy's perspective. We had this same conversation about, yes, the media wants to portray it in many ways that this is a Black issue or an African-American issue. And yes, we have been probably the most vocal. But I was also curious to hear from her, what are our brown brothers and sisters talking about? What is the Latino? And it wasn't very dissimilar. And I think, to me, every citizen will forget what your race is, your gender, sexual orientation, has every right to voice their opinion. And what I've been trying to say to our people within the law enforcement side, we gotta listen. We can't be the victims, right? Because at the end of the day, it was a law enforcement officer who killed Mr. Floyd, our law enforcement officers, right? And as a profession, we have to own it. And I think sometimes we in law enforcement thought it isn't an easy thing to want to accept, but there are close to 1 million police officers out there. If one of them unfortunately did something wrong, we have to own it as a profession and do what? Listen and be what? Willing to do what? Communicate and find a way to address the concern. And I also say this, I think law enforcement, 99% do a great job. But the difference I tell people in that profession, law enforcement, in this profession, they have the ability to take life. Now, that's always a last resort, but it's different in that sense, that based on circumstances, and as they view the danger that's involved, and hopefully someone's life, they have the ability to take a life. That makes this conversation very different in many ways. But no, we support wholeheartedly our law enforcement officers, but we also support who? Our citizens. And I should also say this, everyone that wears a uniform is what? A citizen first, meaning when the uniform comes off or goes on, and I think, and many of them, of course, are African-American, Latino, or white. So that's the other part here is I tell everyone that these officers have families too. And so they're also dealing with what? I'm sure they're responsible for their own family members, their community, but at the end of the day, we have to own it, Tony. We cannot pass the buck. And as President Truman would say, the buck stops here. So Dewayne Crawford views his job as the buck stops here, and I must be responsive to my constituents.
So, Dewayne, given what you just said,
Yep.
I'm sure that you've been in contact with many of your members,
Yes.
just to check on them and make sure that
Yeah.
they are doing good, because
Yeah.
not only is the organization being impacted corporately as an
Yes.
organization, it's also its membership, it's individuals that are being impacted.
Absolutely.
So can we talk a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing right now that they're trying to deal with as individuals?
Yeah, and it's of course very complex, each person, but I will tell you, we've been doing every few weeks, we call this the blessing of the badge. We've been doing it because we wanted to create kind of a safe space for just a spiritual break, right? And so to answer your question, we've been trying to allow people to share. Now, I will admit, most of the blessings of the badge were during the height of the pandemic, right? We've also done them since then, giving people a forum where they can talk about the challenges they're experiencing. They can reach out and get moral and spiritual and maybe technical support. The event we're doing on Friday is targeting our federal members of Noble, but also the entire federal law enforcement world, primarily through the Department of Homeland Security. But it started off with, let's do something for our federal members to talk about what Noble is doing nationally, what's going on in their local chapters, and what can they do. And it expanded, and I was so glad to hear when Homeland Security said, hey, we want to do the same thing. So now we're going to be doing, so to answer your question, they're dealing with the issue of how do I ensure in my space and in my agency and in my community, I'm leading by example. But at the same time, how can I be a blessing to someone else? By what? Educating and informing. And the most basic thing is, how do I make sure people stay safe during these protests? How do I ensure that the police have the opportunity to have their First Right Amendments respected, the ability to assemble and freedom of speech? But then at the same time, how do I make sure they're safe? And I'll tell you, one of our chiefs, police chief Larry Boone in Norfolk, Virginia, he actually had a sign saying Black Lives Matter. And so I think they're all trying to find a way where they can demonstrate we're part of the community. There is not a dividing line between those in law enforcement and the community. They're one and the same. And I know we try to make it that way, but I don't know any person that would disagree that I'm African American, right? I was born this way, I'm gonna die this way. And though I may put a uniform on, at the end of the day, my DNA is that. Whether you're white American, what have you, and I think, let's not say with this thing, Tony. Used to be a time when a politician would say, I'm an American first, right? Before I get into my political persuasion, they would get up and say what? God bless America, I'm a proud American. Not that that's gonna solve this, but that left a long time ago. We are common, both with our religions, right? Our race, but also as Americans. And I think somewhere that got lost along the way. I've not heard a politician on a national level say, I'm first an American. I know, we're aging ourselves. I do think that the soul of America, not is at stake, but it's reclaiming it. Because at the end of the day, Tony, we've been around long enough to know what? These things have occurred in the past. We've found some ways as a country to come together, and we've got to find some common ground.
And you said something really interesting now about the things that officers, the things that we as a country need to do to try to get back on track.
Yep.
So I want to piggyback on that, and ask you this. What do you think we should be doing as corporate America, and in particular, Walmart, as in working with law enforcement and figuring out the best things that we could do?
You want to get me in trouble now, right? Okay, I'll go there. So, Tony, as you know, I came right out of college at Hampton University, worked for IBM, and I worked for, been on Wall Street and all these different, all these different companies, and ADT and type. So I spent the majority of my adult life either being, growing up in these organizations or leading them in some cases in management. So it used to be a time we used to say, am I a good corporate citizen, right? And over time, that's kind of evolved. But I think it was interesting that word citizen. Now we're aging ourselves again. I'm 55, but I remember in my 20s, in my 30s, that was a common thing. Are you a good corporate citizen. Back to what I said earlier, I think some of this goes back to, as a company, what does our brand stand for? And at the end of the day, it isn't about how good your products and services are. Yeah, you may have the hottest widget, it may last for a year. But I remember my early years at IBM, we used to always focus so much on what do we stand for as a corporation? And so to answer your question, the silence sometimes, and I say this to law enforcement all the time too, we have 18,000 agencies, but I do say this a lot. Sometimes your silence means what? Complicity. I could be construed as complicity. And what I worry about is too many of our institutions, I'm gonna say it in a broader term, have been quiet. And my concern is, at my point in my life, you ain't gonna tell me anything, but for these younger people, I worry that they don't see the kind of leadership, whether it be a corporate institution or a healthcare institution or what have you, that are saying, I'm gonna stand for what's right. You may not agree with me, but as the old saying goes, Tony, leadership is hard. It's a lonely job being a leadership. The other part I would say that's different than them, when we were younger, these young people pay attention more. The other part is there could be a backlash. I don't think our corporate leaders are understanding this. Your silence is also saying to your consumers where they may stand as a consumer of your products and services. And as a consumer, I can opt in and opt out. Now, and law enforcement, we as citizens, we can't opt in and opt out. You have a police department, you have no option but to opt in or opt out. Your tax-paying dollars are gonna go there. But in the private sector, it's completely different. Now, I would say to corporations, if you haven't communicated to your consumers, they're gonna communicate for you, either in their purchasing decisions or in how they value your brand. And so I think back to Ferguson, and now we're looking at Minneapolis. And unfortunately, in my humble opinion, significant amounts of our senior corporate leadership have been, now, are companies putting money out there? Absolutely. You're saying, press statements, and we appreciate that. But I would appreciate even more if organizational leaders were willing to either come together or individually and say, at the end of the day, we carry influence in this country. See, decisions are being made in silos. But let me be very frank about it. The wild card are corporations. Because at the end of the day, if corporations said to Dewayne Crawford, Noble, you ain't doing enough. I gotta do what, Tony? I gotta listen, stop what I'm doing, and I better get a response, right? If Walmart came to Noble and said, we love investing in your missions, but you aren't doing enough. And I think, I'm hoping maybe that the corporate wild card could not, I want to say step up, but just get engaged and say, we as a corporate industry, we as your Fortune 500 companies are saying to you, Dewayne Crawford, and you, President Trump, and whoever, that we are giving you these lists of demands, because be very frank about it, those corporations can also protest. I would also say this, we can't complain when our own employees, right, begin to conduct themselves based on what they're being told through social media, or what they're seeing, if we as a corporation don't stand up and say certain things are unacceptable. Now, I'm not the corporate America. I'm just saying that I think there's an opportunity of healing that the corporate, I'm not saying every corporation, but I'm just saying, I don't know of one statement where even 25 corporations got together and said, we stand for X. And last I'll say about this, and these young people are different. They'll boycott in less than a week's notice. And I respect that. But these young people are gonna be a lot more, I think, aggressive and tie their dollar to your actions. Tony, for a lot of reasons, we didn't really get that involved. I didn't get that involved in that in my 20s. I'm more involved now, but my kids, when they're 20s, they actually are texting me, Dad, should I actually buy this? How about this one? I'll put a name out there, Home Depot. I've gotten more texts. I've been trying to tell people that, I think his name is Bernie, anyway, one of the founders, that he no longer is on the board of Home Depot. But they're fired up about that. I'm not knocking home. I'm just saying that I've gotten more text messages about one, and I said, guys, before you go upset, he no longer is on the board of Home Depot. Now, if you don't want to buy Home Depot, that's your business. But please don't make the decision because their founder is no longer on the board. But these young people are just a lot more aggressive, and I would caution all of our companies, and you know this better than I do, Walmart has a history of serving the least of us. When you first started out, your prices were what? So much more affordable that everyday people could get quality products and services. So you know the least of us exists. And I would encourage our companies to say, you can create a whole new generation of loyal customers if you maybe appeal to what they're talking about. Doesn't mean you have to do what? Violate some business plan or put your company in some legal issue. But I will say this, the same thing that probably should have happened during Ferguson, people are gonna begin to add up the equation and who did what. And I'm very much afraid that the companies I've had a chance to serve and work for are gonna look up and lose a generation. And let's not say about this is employment. Other part is, do people want to work for a company that they think wasn't a good corporate citizen? Now we'll see how it shakes out.
Yes, and I tell you, you are speaking my language.
Yep.
It is something that we have definitely had a lot of conversations here within Walmart.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud. I'm very proud of our CEO who has done a couple of things. One, you know, he connected with the Business Roundtable. He is the chair of the organization, which of course is made up of the top 200, you know, companies in the country, and has said, we are going to get our hands dirty and get some work done. And together we're going to make some change. But he also said, you know, hey, we got to get our own house together, right? So he came back, made an announcement and said, this is what we're going to do. One, we're going to put $100 million towards this effort, creating this new center for racial equity within the company. But not just that, to your point, Dewayne, to your point, you know, he said, we've got to make sure that we're doing the right things in-house. Are we taking care of our associates, where our associates feel that they are valued and valid and welcome? Are we doing the best that we can there? Are we doing the best for the communities that we serve? Like you said, it's more than just providing the right price on products, right? But it's making sure that our stores are seen as valuable members of that community. And so he has really been on this thing. And what I love the most about it, Dewayne, he said, I'm telling my leaders right now, and I'm paraphrasing. He's like, get with the program, or really, there's no place for you here. And I love it.
And it's so important,
it's going to take that kind of work, right, to really make it happen. And you know it's going to take. We all know it's going to take time. You can't have it won't happen overnight. But we have to just be committed in doing it, because, like you said, Dewayne, you know, where we are today is no different than where we were in 2014 when Ferguson took place, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, the same kind of situation. But literally, if you look at it, when you compare it side by side, you know, parallel, they were the same kind of things that we're dealing with back then. And
but the one difference, though, Tony, is we're seeing diversity in these marches. I mean, I'm not seeing, well, maybe it says maybe Occupy Wall Street, but I'm not seeing this many white, which is a positive. I think, to your point, people are saying, are we back here again? And you're right. I also said this to another, all these interviews I've been doing, but when I talked about this was, Noble talked about there's an imbalance in resource allocation, right? And the other part about this, I think people are saying, is that, okay, we understand this. At the end of the day, we still can't do what? Handle COVID-19, policing, having it kill Mr. Floyd. I think people are basically saying, even from a distribution of resources, how are we ensuring that the have-nots have more? So I tell everybody, I just think the country's at a point right now where it's demanding that everybody's included. And it goes back to towards humanity. Is everyone's humanity equally respected? And I think and I tell you, when I went to Michael Brown and Ferguson, I spoke there. I'll never forget this, and I said this to the chief at the time. If you can't go to his mother and just say my condolences, forget the legal things that are going behind the scenes, but the ability to tell someone my heartfelt condolence, not because I think there's something wrong, but we still took your son's life. I think this thing of humanity, a lot of these people, in my humble opinion, are saying at a minimum, respect my humanity. Maximum, include me fully in your country. But minimum, I'm a human and I deserve to be respected just as much as anyone else. But, and we have these conversations all the time, but I would tell your viewing audience that one person can make a difference. Your CEO, one person saying, I'm gonna lead in this fashion does make a difference.
So talking about what we do personally, right? What one person can do. Yeah. What are you gonna do, Dewayne Crawford?
Well, you know, I'm already fired up. But it's interesting you say that. So right now, I keep asking myself, what can I do to make sure that the outcome is somewhat different than Ferguson? So when Ferguson happened, there were a lot of issues that we identified. And to President Obama's credit, he did what he could because the Senate and the House were controlled by Republicans. I'm not knocking the Republican Party, but he did all things through executive order, and he had the 21st century policing recommendations. What I've said is, Dewayne, you got to do everything humanly possible to get a federal law in place that's as comprehensive as possible, that deals with the immediate issues of law enforcement reform, and at the same time, deal with the hottest thing, the use of force policy, right? And what I also got to do is, my own little way, influence my Department of Justice in particular to say, what can you do, void or outside of what we can do in Congress? Meaning, what can my Attorney General do that can also address some of these things immediately? But answer your question, I've said to my wife, I may not get what I want, but I've got to do everything possible to say to these protesters, those of us that were in these rooms and these meetings that have some level of influence, did everything possible to get the law changed. I respect what President Obama did, but we could not get the laws changed.
Dewayne, you were, we had the opportunity to meet with you earlier this week. You came and was so gracious to be a guest of ours during our corporate affairs meeting, and let me tell you, it was fantastic. Everybody loved it. I cannot tell you how many notes I got from people just thanking you, thanking us for having you on as a guest. And one of the things that we talked about, right, was the fact that we're hearing all the rumblings out here in communities where they're saying, hey, we should just defund the police department. And so I love what you talked about then, and would love for you to share a little bit about this with this audience. So, as you're hearing these kinds of things out there about defunding police departments, what are your thoughts, and what are the things that people aren't thinking about as these discussions are taking place?
So let me just first say, I respect anyone's right to voice any opinion. And I think we in law enforcement shouldn't take this conversation of defunding police as kind of a negative thing. To me, every city administrator, every citizen, period, should be looking at their local community to say, how are my tax-paying dollars being spent? My biggest concern is look at this stuff holistically. For example, the issue of defunding law enforcement, one of my chiefs said this, Chief Ramos in DeKalb County, Georgia said this, it isn't just the issue of defunding law enforcement. You're also talking about the communities that law enforcement protects and serves. So the question is, isn't it as simple as, well, if I defund this part of my law enforcement agency, there's two things to look at. What is the impact first to the citizens that they're protecting and serving? And then two, what is the impact to the law enforcement part of that equation? The other part is, I agree that law enforcement is being asked to do too much. Everything from school education truancy to mental illness to issues around drugs, homelessness, you name it. Be very frank about it. In many communities, the largest mental institution isn't the mental institution, it's jail. So to me, law enforcement has also got to decide where do we think we fit within the societal priorities, right? And it's even a national thing. This has got to be a local thing. Me as the mayor, the city council, the county commissioner, the city manager, what are the priorities of our community? And I worry because we're so caught up in, I get it. This is a hot thing. When it was Ferguson was what? Body worn cameras, and what, you know, I get it, defund the police. But is anyone suggesting we remove 18,000 agencies? Are we saying we want to cut it by a certain percent? I think that to me, the wise thing to do is say each community should be evaluating the needs of their community. And whether that's the police department, the fire department, the education system, housing, jobs, whatever it is, there should hopefully be an analysis saying, is the money that we're spending and the way that we're spending aligning the needs of the community? But I'll last say this, we in law enforcement have to also humble ourselves and listen and ask the question, why is this such an important thing? The issue of training, issue of biases, it's a lot more complex, I think, than is giving someone a tool. But I respect citizens' rights to ask this. But my chief said it very eloquently. She said, you're not talking about defunding just an entity. There's the department and there's that community. And is that the best use or decision for that? And that community may not be the whole city, it may be one neighborhood. That's my fear, is that we begin to jump at things to say, and then I'll say this, law enforcement has to be prepared to do what? They've got to show an ROI on what they're doing. Okay, don't touch my money. Well, is there return on investment on what you're being asked to do? But Tony, the pendulum swings both ways. But I said this to one of the mayors the other day. I encourage people, find the data, do the homework. Because any logical, reasonable person would say what? Show me the data. What can I expect if you make these changes? And does it really solve what we're trying to fix? But so I'm not against it. I'm just very concerned that people are using this as a way to say, and remember, we should not be using anything to either beat up one or the other, meaning the people that, if you got 1,000 police officers and you want to let go of 10% of them, they're still your citizens. Where are they gonna go? So to me, a lot of this is how do we work collectively? I would love it, I say to people all the time, if a city administrator has not been doing this analysis, they should be.
Yeah, excellent point, excellent point. So Dewayne, I just got one last question for you. You know, I was talking to Ben Hassan, who is our chief culture, diversity, and inclusion officer. He did a real talk right before yours, actually.
And I asked him, Philly? Isn't Ben from Philadelphia?
He is from Philadelphia. Yes, he is. So we were talking, and he mentioned in our conversation about sometimes the need for tagging out, meaning that there are times that you're involved in all this work that you just simply have to tag out to revive, refresh, renew, so you can get back into the game. So I'm asking you, what are you doing to tag out?
Well, you know what? My wife, Kathy Crawford, she brought a Chihuahua into the house. We've had almost for two weeks now. Copper. And I haven't had, we had another dog before, but still, I don't used to have a lot of dogs around. Copper, and he's only been 2 months old. Copper has changed the environment in the house. Copper has become not more just part of the family. We got like a little baby, right? That's been great. And exercising, going and taking walks, just going outside, walking in our cul-de-sac here. And then thirdly, to be very frank, taking the time from a spiritual drink, reading scripture. So I'm doing the best job I can, but exercising, reading scripture, playing with Copper. And I also say this, really enjoying the dialogue, trying to force myself, like talking to Cindy this morning, and listening as best I can to what everybody is saying, right? Because I think we try to make this too simple. The country hasn't really been black and white for a few generations now. And even when we probably thought it was in the 50s and the 40s, it probably never was. But I think understanding that, yes, African Americans have probably sound a bell, But similar to Reverend Barber, this issue, the poor campaign, there are some bigger issues in the nation, and African Americans are part of that. For example, I just saw a video that one of our corporate friends just sent me, and in it, it said, Black Lives Matter too. And it's interesting because you'll see it soon, but basically they're trying to capture law enforcement, either taking a knee or engaging protesters. But I think trying to listen and remember our forefathers. As you know, Tony, our forefathers at the height of the civil rights movement, all they really had was the U.S. Constitution and a hope and a prayer. You think about it, they had the, equal protection under the law, the 14th Amendment they had. But I always say to myself, what they did was such less. They actually had to believe that their God, their fellow man, was going to weigh in to ensure they had every access to the American dream. This is the wrong time for me to start saying, I can't take another step forward. We've got to remember those stories that our parents told us and our grandparents told us. Not that it's the same issues. It's not a civil rights movement. I do think it's a humanity movement. I do think that the issues of class structure, issues of humanity, fairness, yes, law enforcement is part of that. But I'll be very frank with you, remembering those old stories you were taught and saying to myself, God, this guy here needs the same wisdom and guidance you gave my mama and her mama or my dad or his dad, because I don't think we're gonna get here, Tony, with buzzwords or gadgets or quick fixes. I don't even think, to be honest, if we're gonna be able to pass enough legislation to solve all these issues. I think we can solve some things, but respecting somebody's humanity, Tony, I don't think a bill can do that. Or respecting someone's right to exist, like to exist in this country, I don't think there's a way to pass a bill to do that. But I do think there's a way to pass a bill to ensure that legally you do that. That legally you do every opportunity to succeed in this country. That can be done. But no, Tony, it's a great question. But yeah, but copper has taken over our household, and I'm loving it, man.
That is awesome, Dewayne. I'm so happy. Dewayne, this has been an amazing conversation, and I hope that those who have the opportunity to view this episode really enjoy it, because you have left some really rich nuggets for us to absorb and to think about. And so I can't thank you enough, and I can't thank you enough for all of the support that you have given me and you've given Walmart. Anytime that we've called on you, you've helped us out, whether it is working with the foundation as we look at community cohesion grants or talking through particular issues that have happened throughout the country. You've been always there for us. And so we thank you, and know that we appreciate you and look forward to continued working together.
And just know it's also mutual. We love the Walmart family. We've solved so many complex issues over the years. And I always encourage all of your viewing audience just to understand that, there's no simple yes or no. I don't think Americans are either conservative or liberal. I don't think even Republican or Democrat. I'll be very frank. I think most Americans are somewhere in the middle. The sad part about it is we're in some cases feel forced to make a choice. But I think the choice I'm looking for is back to what I said before. We used to say in the old days, I'm a proud American and I happen to be, Republican or I'm hoping maybe we'll get back to that. Not that I think that being American is better than some other country. I'm just saying there was some solidarity as a nation, and I'm worried that our divisions are allowing those other bad actors, whether they be China or Russia, we're almost self-imploding because it isn't hard for them to put some social media posts and we get fired up. But that's because our house isn't in order. And when you have divisions in your own country, it allows for that. But no, Tony, I love you guys. It's mutual. And whatever we at Noble can do, please count on.
You got it. And you have yourself a great rest of your day. Keep doing what you're doing, and we will definitely be in contact.
And Kathy and Dewayne and our newest edition, Copper, say thank you and good evening.
You are the best. You are the best, Dewayne, and we will talk to you again real soon.